Good morning. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Senator Michelle Stennett. I work for District 26, which is Camas, Gooding, Blaine, and Lincoln counties. I had to think about that. And I've been in the legislature for about 7 years. This is my 8th session that we just started in January. And I am on the State Affairs Committee and the Resources and Environment Committee. Right now I'm working on legislation. I do a lot of co-sponsoring because I am the minority leader in the Senate, helping my colleagues with legislation. But I've been very interested in education, invasive species, and cybersecurity this year. So these are the things that you may have heard that the governor has also been talking about cybersecurity, that all of our states need to do a better job at that. So we are working cooperatively with some of our colleagues in the private sector, like the national laboratories and universities, in improving our cybersecurity.
So what do you do as Senate Minority Leader? What is your job?
Well, I am the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and my job is to make sure that our voice in our districts are heard. I have a very good relationship with the majority leadership and the majority party in the Senate, so we do work collaboratively well. We do disagree on a few issues, but there's a lot of things that we do together and that we agree on. And that's my job, is to make sure we have that communication, that we're well represented, and that we do good policy.
What do you think is the biggest issue facing Idaho?
The biggest issue, and I think that we've been tackling it and we do need to do much more, is our education system. And this is, we believe that it needs to be pre-K or early learning all the way through career. And that's because we are doing a better job of bringing in industry and improving the economy. But if we don't have a skilled workforce, then companies will not want to be able to come here. And if we don't have a good education system, companies won't want to come here. So part of the good economy is to have a good education, to prepare people for having good living wages, and to make sure we start early enough so that they have a good chance of completing to the end. We don't have a very good success rate leaving high school, going into university or higher education or into the trades, and we're trying to improve our system to better prepare our students for being able to have the ability to earn those jobs and to get those jobs and stay in their communities.
What were some of the big things to come up this week in the Senate?
Right now, the Senate does the appointments of all of the people that the governor has appointed in our agencies and our departments. That is the Senate's job. In the House, they take care of all revenue starts in the House, and all appointments live in the Senate. So we've been doing, you may have heard about some of the commissioners with Fish and Game, for instance. There was sort of a brouhaha over the summer that our chairman of the Senate had talked to the governor about a couple of our commissioners in our region down in Twin Falls and up in the Custer County area, up the regions 4 and 5, I believe. And so there was a reappointment of 2 new commissioners. They came before us this week to be confirmed, and we had a lot of discussion about elite tags and hunting and what they would do differently, and just it's a very rigorous process. We want to make sure that they do a good job on the commission. So there is a lot of discussion about region and party parity, and so it gets very in-depth, but I think we did a good job.
Can you tell us about what happened with the oil and gas, the new rules that were proposed?
Last week, I understand that the oil and gas rules are a new set of rules that come before us. You may have remembered on the ballot HJR 5, which allowed for the legislature to oversee the rules process from our agencies and departments, which not all states have the ability to do. And the voters confirmed that we should continue to do this, and it was put in the Constitution. And so this is part of the process that both the House and the Senate committees do, is they receive rules from different departments, and oil and gas rules come out of the Department of Lands, the Idaho Department of Lands. And so they presented their rules to the House, and the House rejected them. They didn't think that they had done a good enough job, and it was to come before us. There had been a lot of discussion and debate, and finally it was taken off of the agenda in the Senate side because we were likely to reject them also. So when those rules come before us, we can either accept or reject, and that's all part of the process of having that extra set of eyes on on how agencies and departments work and how the state works cooperatively with them. And so that's a great deal of what we do in the first month of session.
What happened in committee this week?
Oh goodness. I'm on State Affairs and Resources and Environment, so pretty much a lot of the bills for in State Affairs, anything that has to do with elections or those sorts of processes of how we operate within the Constitution comes before the State Affairs Committee. So we did quite a few of those this week. And then in Resources and Environment, like I said, we had a great deal with fish and game and oil and gas. And of course, we have all those confirmations and rules that I mentioned. So it's not as glamorous. We get into more of the meat of things as we get into this month.
What do you think is the most interesting thing that has happened so far this year?
Well, I'm of the opinion that the less exciting things that sort of blindside us, the better. But you probably have heard about a great deal of sort of politicking that's happened in the House side. That really hasn't happened on the Senate side. It's a more deliberative body. We have really good relationships with our colleagues. We process things within the Senate differently than the House, and we have half the members, so it's easier to navigate. So I'd have to say it's been pretty quiet for us this week, and I'm happy to see that we're just doing our work and not having things go awry. The less that happens, the better.
What do you think about the tax bill that just passed the House?
Well, I know there was a great deal of debate, I believe it was yesterday on the House about that. I'm concerned that the surplus that we have is our general fund, and they are one-time monies. This is something that is not ongoing. We cannot determine if we're going to have the same amount in the next year. And so when you look at what are the best use of those extra monies for this year, we have to be very concerned. The weather has been unusual this year, and so our roads are in particularly bad shape. I know a lot of people complain about the potholes or whole sections of roads that have been closed, and then we don't know what's going to happen this spring. I know that Washington and Fayette counties have already declared an emergency. It's likely we're going to have flooding and emergencies on into spring as all of this snow melts. So that and education and transportation infrastructure and all of that are things that we should be looking at with this extra money. So it may give a person $25 or $30 extra in their family. Would that really change your budget? And it may for some people, but when you look into as to what the state is responsible for, there's so many things out there that impacts people's public health and safety that we should be taking care of. So that's the debate with this tax break that is going before us. What is the best use of those dollars?
Do you think that's the worst legislation that's been introduced so far? And if not, what do you think is the worst legislation that's been introduced?
Well, and I can speak for myself, and it isn't in the Senate yet, but I have heard that there are bills about immigration and Sharia law and more of those types of bills about having a dialogue about what's happening in the world and how that impacts the United States and the state. The difficulty we have is when you bring those sorts of laws in front of us, like the immigration law. In this particular bill, it would have put the pressure on local communities and law enforcement for doing what the statute or the legislation proposed, and it puts it in the crosshairs of being preempted by federal law. The problem with immigration is on local and state levels, we don't have a lot of control over immigration. That's a federal issue. And we can do what we can within communities only so far before we get sideways with federal law. And so and then the Sharia law, anything that I think comes across as not being, as being angry or afraid, I would hope that we would go forward as a legislature and as a people being a lot more thoughtful about it instead of reactive. And so that is my personal opinion. I think we should, we all come from immigrants and we all come from, unfortunately, many of our ancestors have gone through a hazing process before they've been accepted, and we just have to understand that we're lucky to be Americans. We all had our opportunity, our ancestors gave us this opportunity to be here and to love our country, and we should be more open-minded about it. So those types of things have been coming forward as a reaction. I don't know how far they'll go. They've created good debate, and I honor that because that's why we're here, to have that dialogue and debate. And so I'm not sure how far they'll go, but those sorts of bills concern me because I don't want to be putting people in a position to have to do something that isn't within their purview to be able to do.
Can you tell us a little bit about the quagga mussels that you had brought up during your response?
Oh, I should have brought my quagga mussel. It's in my office. I have an Idaho plate that has these mussels all over it. And when we talk about invasive species, there are the biggest concern right now, and we had a task force looking into it, is quagga and zebra mussels, mostly the quagga mussels. They're an invasive species. They came into the Great Lakes. They've infested waters within Colorado and Nevada, and now they've been found in Montana. And the problem with them is they grow so fast and they get so big that they clog waterways, they damage fisheries, they will impact to the thousands and millions of dollars in cleanup in our hydroelectric systems, in our dams. They get onto your boats, and that's how you usually bring them in. And if we are clean so far, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon, and so that whole Snake River and the whole Bonneville water systems that do not have these quagga and zebra mussels yet. And we are really determined to try to have border control with our boats in order to not have them come into our waters, because once they're here, you cannot eradicate them. And then it costs taxpayers and the state and the region thousands and millions of dollars to keep them clean and to keep cleaning the systems, and we're trying to prevent that. So there's a large discussion about how we can put a better plan together and more reinforcement on our borders to keep them out of our waters.
Is there anything else that you want to tell voters and constituents to watch out for? Any legislation you hear that's coming that you want people to be ready to write to their legislators about?
Well, I always encourage everybody, because all of you out there have a different idea about what you find important, and it's always helpful to us that if you see something that is not functional or workable or is potentially incorrect, because sometimes we put legislation together that we don't know there's inadvertently some collateral damage someplace else with good intention. And we always ask our constituents and everybody in the state to please contact us if you see something that you're concerned about. And I have hundreds of emails from people that do tell me what it is that concerns them and that I should be looking out for, and I am ever grateful for that kind of communication. It helps us do our jobs better. It helps us be truly the voice of what your concerns are, and we can't always see everything that comes to us. So I would say that education, obviously healthcare is going to be a big issue this year. I'm not sure what the legislature is prepared to do because of the new administration in Washington, D.C. But these are things that we need to take care of, and one way or another we'll be wading through this. And so the more information that you can give about your concerns and your experiences so that we can do a better job is always helpful. So there are plenty of things out there, but I wouldn't want to pick anything because I know people have different concerns, and the more you keep in communication with us, the better.
Can you speak about the wage gap bill?
I'm not sure what the wage gap bill is. I know that we've worked on increasing minimum wage in both the House and Senate in previous years. It may have to do, must be in the House because I haven't seen it yet, but it might have to do with the wage gap between men and women. It might be, I'd have to look at the language, but I think I've always been a proponent that we all do a fair day's work and we deserve to be an equal fair pay, and so regardless of gender. So and if that's according to that, I'm an advocate for us to be able to have living wages. We are still probably the highest minimum wage earning state in the nation per capita, and we need to improve. That's not fair. It does a disservice particularly to our rural communities. So it's up to us to try to find ways to improve that and keep our communities, people in our communities, and help them thrive. And that's going to take a great deal of effort. So any way we can do to help people earn a good wage, I think, is a good start.
Great, that's it for questions. You want to wrap up?
I just want to thank everybody, whoever has been able to join me this morning. Thank you so much for participating in the political process. Remember that you should always feel comfortable to get a hold of us if you have concerns, and stay active and continue to be part of our process, and appreciate you taking the time today to be with us.
What town halls do you have coming up?
Just to let you know, because we're in my district, we're always really good about going around and talking to our communities. And in the middle of session, we always go and try to hit our communities during a weekend. And so this weekend, it's February 10th and 11th. And on February 10th at 5:30 p.m., we'll be at Ketchum City Hall. And on February 11th at 8 a.m., we'll be at Bellevue, Oak Street, and Cafe and Deli in Bellevue. 10:30 will be Shoshone Community Center. Noon will be Gooding. I think, what did we decide? I think it's the Lincoln Hotel. I'll have to check. And 2 o'clock is Wendell City Hall, and then 4 o'clock is Hagerman City Hall. So if you have the opportunity to come join us for about an hour and a half, we will share with you, and this is, I believe, Representative Sally Toon for sure will be with me, but we will be answering your questions about what's happened in session, and hopefully you can give us some good advice for going forward for the rest of the session, and please join us. Thank you.